It was a crisp autumn morning in Atlanta, the kind of day when even the breeze feels ambitious. The city was waking up, people jogging along the Beltline, students crowding coffee shops near Georgia Tech, and entrepreneurs reviewing pitch decks before meetings. Elijah Brooks parked his deep blue Tesla quietly by the curb. The midtown location of Georgia First Bank stood ahead, framed in glass and steel. The building was newer than most on the block, sleek but somehow cold. Elijah stared at it a moment, collecting himself. He wasn't nervous, but he was thoughtful. Intentional. He stepped out, jacket buttoned, posture calm. His gait was unhurried. As he walked, he passed a man in a construction vest who looked up, nodded. Elijah nodded back. Even without knowing him, people could feel something about Elijah. Authority without arrogance. Power without the need to flaunt it. Inside the bank, Linda Hayward glanced up from her clipboard. She saw Elijah coming and instinctively shifted her stance. Something about him, the way he walked, the self-possession, didn't quite fit her mental template. He wasn't a regular. He wasn't one of theirs. And in Linda's mind, people who didn't belong were often a problem. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, moving toward the glass doors before he could reach the handle. Elijah gave her a warm, easy smile. "Yes. I'm here to speak with your commercial accounts officer. I have a 9:30 appointment." Linda didn't return the smile. Her tone turned sharp. "Do you have ID?" "Of course." He handed over both his license and a sleek, matte black business card embossed with his name and the Phoenix Financial logo. Linda gave the ID a quick glance but didn't even read the card. "Wait here. I'll have to verify." "Sure." Elijah stepped aside, near the ficus plant by the entrance. He didn't lean or pace. He simply waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. From her desk inside, Linda watched him intermittently. He hadn't left. Hadn't grown impatient. That, too, was unnerving. ACT2, the waiting game, expanded. By the time 20 minutes had passed, Elijah had seen at least 4 people arrive after him and be taken directly to service counters or back offices. A woman with a child on her hip was offered coffee. A young white man in a Patagonia vest was ushered into an office with a casual, "Hey Kyle, good to see you." Still, no one came for Elijah. He looked around. No signs of a delay. No apologies. Just the same indifferent rhythm. He approached the desk again. Brian, the young teller, looked up quickly. "Hi. I'm Elijah Brooks. I had a 9:30 with your commercial officer." Brian looked down at the appointment screen. His face changed. "Oh, yes. You're right here. I'm not sure why." Linda's voice sliced in. "Brian." He froze. Linda stepped in between them. "This gentleman has been informed we don't have record of that appointment." Brian looked confused. "But it's right. Go assist Ms. Ramirez at counter 3, Linda snapped. Brian hesitated, then looked at Elijah, apologetic. "I'm sorry, sir." Elijah looked at Linda. "May I ask what's going on?" Linda didn't waver. "We can't just let anyone into our offices. If you'd like to schedule an appointment." "I did." "Well, that's not what I see. You'll need to leave." Elijah stared at her for a long moment. Not in anger, in calculation. Then he took out his phone. Dialed a number. "Rachel? Go ahead and send the memo. Full report on Midtown complete. We're moving to stage 2. Linda stiffened. "Excuse me." Elijah looked her dead in the eye. "I own this building. And by next week, I'll own the decision about who works in it." The moment Elijah hung up the call, Linda's demeanor changed. Not because she believed him, but because her control over the situation had been pierced. For the first time in years, she felt unsure inside her own walls. Brian, still standing by the desk, looked back and forth between the two of them. Something about the calm way Elijah spoke had shifted the entire energy of the room. Linda tried to recover. "Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but..." A sleek black SUV pulled up outside the bank. Out stepped Rachel Nguyen. Tall, poised, in a deep red power suit with minimalist gold earrings, Rachel moved with the grace of someone who'd been handling powerful rooms since she was 25. Now in her mid-30s, she was Elijah's most trusted advisor, Phoenix Financial's chief of staff, and the executor of Stage 2. Linda blinked. "Can I help you?" Rachel didn't even glance at her. "Elijah," she said, her tone respectful. "Legal's been notified. HR is en route. I have Devin Clark on the phone, he'll be here in 20 minutes. Linda looked stunned. Who is she?" Elijah turned. "This is Rachel. She manages all the initiatives I approve, including this one. Or rather, the one that was going to be implemented here." "You're serious?" Linda's voice faltered. "I was. Until today." At that moment, the commercial account manager, a tall man named Scott who had just returned from the back, appeared near the hallway. "Elijah," he said, confused. "You're here already? I was told you hadn't arrived." Linda turned a shade paler. Scott walked toward them. "We were supposed to meet this morning to discuss Phoenix's rollout in the Midtown corridor. You're the keynote at our launch breakfast next month." Elijah smiled politely. "We were. But now I'm re-evaluating everything." Scott looked between Elijah and Linda. "What happened?" Rachel handed him a printed memo. "It's all outlined here. For now, we're suspending all collaborative efforts with Georgia First Bank, pending internal review. ACT4, Fallout, expanded." Devin Clark arrived exactly 18 minutes later. A mid-40s black man with decades of banking under his belt, Devin was the kind of regional manager who could calm storms, if they hadn't already reached hurricane strength. By the time he entered the building, Rachel had already gathered statements from customers who had witnessed the interaction. She had the security footage saved. She had documentation. And she had something more important, clarity. "Elijah," Devin said, walking up with an extended hand. "I just got briefed. I'm sorry." Elijah shook his hand. "Thanks, Devin. I wish this were unusual." Devin's jaw tightened. He turned to Linda. "Is there any part of this you want to explain?" Linda had crossed her arms tightly, though her face was flushed. "I followed protocol. He didn't look like..." She stopped herself. "Too late." Devin's voice dropped. "Didn't look like what, Linda?" "I didn't mean. You didn't mean to treat one of our largest stakeholders like he didn't belong in a building he owns." Linda's lips parted, but no words came. Brian stepped forward. Quietly, bravely. "She told me to ignore the schedule. Mr. Brooks' name was right there. I tried to speak up." Devin nodded. "You did the right thing. Please stay, HR will want your statement." Linda opened her mouth again. Elijah raised his hand slightly. "It's done." Devin turned back to him. "You want to take over this branch?" Elijah looked around. "No. I want to transform it. I want to start over." And so he would. The Midtown branch closed temporarily. Officially, it was listed as a community-led redesign, but insiders knew the truth. The entire operation was being gutted and reborn. Elijah didn't waste time. He and Rachel held a series of roundtable discussions, not in boardrooms, but in church basements, barbershops, community centers. He listened. Not to analysts or consultants, but to the people the bank had ignored. They heard from single mothers turned away from business loans. Retirees who didn't understand their options. Young people who had never been taught how credit worked. It was uncomfortable. Raw. But it was exactly what Elijah needed. Back at headquarters, Rachel coordinated with a new architectural firm and cultural design consultants. The redesigned bank would not look like a fortress. It would feel like a resource center. There would be financial literacy kiosks, drop-in mentorship hours, and a community mural wall featuring real local stories. Brian, the young teller who had spoken up, was rehired as a trainee for the new assistant branch manager role. Under Elijah's direct mentorship, he began studying finance at night school, with his tuition paid in full by Phoenix. The change was deeper than aesthetics. Hiring practices were restructured. Interview panels became diverse. Cultural sensitivity training was mandatory. Linda's former office. It was transformed into a co-working space for aspiring entrepreneurs. Bank the Block, Phoenix's outreach initiative, launched officially. Every Saturday, Elijah, or a guest speaker held live sessions about generational wealth, debt, and ownership, streamed online for wider access. One Saturday, a teenager named Davion asked Elijah, "When did you know you were powerful?" Elijah smiled. "When I realized I could change a room by how I treated people, not just by what I owned." The room clapped. Word spread. The community returned, not out of convenience, but out of trust. Act 6, The Spotlight. A month later, the story hit national airwaves. A journalist from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution wrote a feature titled, "The Man Who Bought the Bank That Rejected Him." It went viral. CNN requested an interview. Elijah declined. "This isn't about me," he told Rachel. "It's about us." But eventually, at the insistence of community leaders, Elijah agreed to a televised town hall hosted by PBS. The special, Banking on Dignity, aired during prime time. The footage included scenes from the rebuilt branch, testimonials from local residents, and a sit-down interview with Elijah and Rachel. When asked what drove the transformation, Elijah's answer was simple. "Being denied is painful. But watching others be denied, over and over, is what fuels revolution." Public response was overwhelming. Emails flooded Phoenix's inbox from cities across the country asking how to replicate the model. Elijah created an open-source version of the Roots Rising framework, offering free implementation guides to any institution willing to follow the principles. Meanwhile, Linda, now jobless and reflecting hard, watched the PBS town hall alone in her apartment. The weight of her actions, and their exposure, had left her stunned and ashamed. But something else stirred in her too, possibility. In a notebook, she wrote, "I chose protocol over people. I want to change that." And so began a quiet redemption arc of her own. Linda Hayward hadn't left her apartment in days. The curtains stayed drawn, and the television, once tuned to business news and finance reports, was silent. She found herself staring at the walls more than reading. But on her kitchen table sat one small sign of hope, a notebook. In it, she scribbled notes from podcasts about anti-bias practices, watched interviews with civil rights leaders, and studied inclusive leadership literature she had once dismissed. She even signed up anonymously for a free virtual course called Relearning Leadership. The guilt hadn't faded, but it was no longer paralyzing. It had become fuel. One evening, she walked into a church food pantry near Edgewood and asked to volunteer. The coordinator, a woman named Sharon, didn't recognize her, and that was a blessing. "I'm not here to talk," Linda said. "I'm here to learn. And help, if you'll have me." For weeks, she restocked shelves, packed bags, and walked groceries to elderly cars without anyone knowing her former title or shame. In time, Sharon pulled her aside. "You've got something to offer. Ever consider mentoring younger women?" Linda hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm qualified." "You lived through failure and showed up anyway. That makes you more qualified than most." Back at home, Linda added a new entry to her notebook. Power without humility is a closed door. I used to guard that door. I want to hold it open now. Act 8, Branches Beyond Branches. 6 months after the transformation of the Midtown branch, Phoenix Financial launched the Roots Rising National Tour. Elijah, Rachel, and Brian traveled to 10 cities across America: Detroit, Baltimore, Oakland, St. Louis, Memphis, Cleveland, and more, each chosen for its rich culture and history of resilience, and each a place where traditional banks had failed their communities. In each city, they held pop-up equity hubs. Part financial clinic, part youth rally, part cultural celebration. Local musicians performed, chefs offered food, and teens got their first crash course in personal finance. Brian had blossomed under Elijah's mentorship. He no longer second-guessed himself when speaking in front of crowds. At the Cleveland stop, he spoke to 400 high school students about the time he chose truth over comfort. I thought I'd lose my job, he told them. But sometimes, standing up costs less than staying quiet. Elijah smiled from the wings. Rachel, too, found her voice growing beyond logistics. She had become the architect of something bigger, building not just systems but stories. She organized Phoenix's first annual Financial Freedom Fellowship, a mentorship program for women of color in finance. Meanwhile, Linda sent in an anonymous donation to the Midtown branch's entrepreneurship program, the one housed in her old office. On the envelope, she had scrawled 3 words: "Thank you for evolving." The final stop of the tour was Atlanta, back where it all began. The renovated branch hosted over 1,000 people in its new community square. Food trucks lined the streets. Artists painted a live mural titled, "From Pain to Power." Elijah took the stage. He looked at the crowd, at Davion and his mother, at Brian, at Rachel, at the elders in folding chairs and the teens leaning over fences. And then he said, "Legacy isn't built in boardrooms. It's built every time we decide someone matters. Every time we open a door we once shut. Every time we stand where we were once silenced." The applause rose like a wave. "You were never just customers," he said. "You were always the future. All we had to do was believe it, and act like it." It was late evening when Elijah found himself alone inside the original Midtown branch, now bathed in warm lights and quiet music. The walls, once cold and corporate, were now adorned with local artwork. A massive mural covered the east wall. A painted timeline of Atlanta's resilience, ending with a portrait of Elijah beneath the words, "Dignity builds equity." He sat at the long oak table in the community room, flipping through handwritten thank you cards from students and small business owners. Each message was a reminder that the work had only just begun. Brian entered quietly. "Hey, boss," he said. Elijah smiled. "You don't have to call me that anymore. You're the branch director now." Brian shook his head. "And you're still the reason this exists." Elijah stood and walked to the glass wall. Outside, he could see families gathered under string lights, laughing, eating. What once was a sterile financial building was now a community cornerstone. "Brian," Elijah said slowly, "you're going to take this further than I ever could. You have something I didn't when I started, proof it can work." Brian grew serious. "What if I mess up?" "You will," Elijah said with a chuckle. "But don't forget. Transformation isn't about perfection. It's about showing up. Listening. Adjusting. And staying rooted." In that moment, Elijah handed Brian a sealed envelope. "What's this?" "A letter I wrote for the next leader of this movement. Don't open it yet. Read it the day you feel like quitting." Brian tucked the envelope into his jacket. "I hope I don't need it." "You will," Elijah repeated. "And that's okay." Act 10, The Roots Rise. The following spring, Phoenix Financial held the first annual Roots Rising Summit. Hundreds gathered, educators, policymakers, local activists, and young entrepreneurs. The keynote speaker. Rachel Nguyen, now president of Phoenix Financial. She stood tall on the stage and addressed a packed auditorium. Justice is not a policy. It's a practice. And every institution we touch, banking, education, healthcare, must be accountable to the people it claims to serve. Elijah watched from the front row. She continued. We've seen what happens when dignity becomes our currency. When equity is our mission, not our marketing. And when voices like Brian's are amplified instead of dismissed. The crowd rose to their feet. The camera panned to Brian, now a National Youth Financial Ambassador, sitting beside Davion and his mom. Linda was there, too, quietly sitting in the back. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. But when Rachel spotted her afterward, she approached with grace. I know who you are, Rachel said gently. I know, Linda replied. I'm not here for redemption. Just responsibility. Rachel nodded. We need both. Elijah approached them, smiling warmly. Thank you for coming, he said to Linda. She held out her notebook, now filled. You taught me more than I deserved to learn. No one deserves to be abandoned, Elijah said. Even those who failed. Especially them. Later that night, Elijah stood on stage one last time. This started with a closed door, he said. But what we're building now, these are open doors. Not just for us, but for generations to come. The lights dimmed. The screen behind him lit up with the Roots Rising emblem, a tree, its roots breaking through concrete. And below it, not just rebuilt. Reimagined.